Alright, I think I've got this. Do I have this? The answer to that is a resounding no. I am literally Chaos Theory incarnate this morning. I am still scribbling notes down because I am that disorganized. But I'm supposed to have like a whole bunch of stuff ready for this, and I don't have it ready for this, and I'm not ready for this. But we're here, we're getting it done anyway. We'll figure it out as we go. And my speakers are still on, so I gotta turn those off. Well, at least I know that you can hear me. I can hear me. There's a whole 2 people in the chat right now. One of them is me. One of them is Blizz. Unless YouTube is lying to me and there's more people here than I think there is because, well, YouTube doesn't know how to count. But I've got notes. I've got sources. I think we're ready to go. Yes, we're ready to go, so let's get rid of that now and get this started. Hello, Shadowcat back, and we are back on the lecture trail again. I know I've been kind of off on that lately, but I'm getting back on there. JP is here. Hello, JP. Good to see you. I understood that you were going to be taking a machete to your lawn today. So I'm going to either assume that you got rained out, or you're operating a machete while listening to me. And if that's the case, I do not recommend having a machete or any sharp implements while I'm going through this lecture, just because this is going to be a very dangerous lecture, and I don't want you to hurt yourself. Because we're going to be covering some sensitive topics today. Actually, now, in light of that, no, actually hold on to that machete. You might need it. And also, just as a precautionary warning to everybody, this is going to be a helmets on lecture. So, if you got them, wear them. Let's go ahead and turn this down a little bit, because it doesn't need to be that loud. And JP says rained out again. Hope it dries this afternoon. Okay, speaking from experience, it will not be dry this afternoon. At least it never is for me. Like, you got to give that a whole day to dry out. It just doesn't work. So, anyway, what are we doing today? Well, very simply, today we are revisiting an old lecture that I did because I listen to the news every day. I listen to a lot of cultural stuff, a lot of things like that. Jeffrey's in the house. Hello, Jeffrey. Good to have you here. And obviously, I am very big into the whole culture war thing. I follow politics, I follow culture, and the reason that I follow these things is, number one, because I missed my calling in life. I should have gone into politics a long time ago. Obviously, that is not happened, and it's never going to happen because I have not cultivated what is necessary to create the empty shell of a person to become a politician, unfortunately for me. I have to be human with the rest of you, unfortunately. Yeah. The other thing, however, is that even though I find politics fascinating, I do find the interweaving of politics and culture to be fascinating. I think it was, if I'm remembering these names right, and I'm really bad with names, I think it was Breitbart that once said that politics is downstream from culture. And he was right about that, because the fact is that culture is our values and principles, the fundamentals of what we base our life on. And of course, our politics are simply to reinforce those values, beliefs that we already have. We all agree that X should be good, therefore we pass laws to promote X. We also believe that Y should be bad, therefore we pass laws to punish Y. Politics is downstream from culture, and of course law is immediately adjacent to politics. That is not the subject of today's lecture, but the whole cultural aspect of it is. Because today I want to go back to what I talked about when I talked about the progressive religion. Now, this is something that I have mentioned before in several other videos. I have mentioned that I do believe that modern leftism, modern progressivism is a religion. And when I say modern progressivism, modern leftism, I do mean the umbrella of everything underneath it. I'm not necessarily talking about a singular entity here, so much as I am talking about the broad movement that involves the gender umbrella, the racial umbrella, the sex umbrella, all of these different things that all seem to find themselves coalescing under a single banner. Now, what that banner is debatable. Some people would call it the Democrat banner. But that's not true because, well, not everyone has Democrats. We have Democrats in the US. In Canada, they have the Liberals and the NDP, I believe, which I think, and I'll have to get a correction here in the chat, I think NDP is the New Democrat or Democratic Party? I think I've got that, but correct me if I'm wrong. Over in Britain, I believe their left party is Labour. I think. But I'm not as familiar with the variety of parties over in Britain's parliamentary system because I have a hard enough with Canada, and Canada only has like 5. And I think Britain has somewhere in the area of 13. But I'm not sure. And I have been stated to be correct. It is the New Democrat Party. Great. Either way, though, they're all on the left. And when we say the left, what do we mean? Well, it's easier to say what the left is in comparison to the right. The right is the side of conservatism and, more importantly, traditionalism. They are the party that says, this is how we do things. This is how we've always done things. And this is how we should continue to do things because these are the right things and they work. The left, on the other hand, well, literally the other hand, the left hand, the left says that we should not do those things. Hence why leftism is often called progressivism. If the conservatives say that we should keep marriage between a man and a woman, it is the progressives who say we should not do that. Not that we should stop men and women from being married necessarily, but that we should open it up for everybody. That kind of thing. So whatever they say, whatever the conservatives say, the progressives are generally just against it. They tend to be more reactionary, which can be good and bad, depending on the circumstances. I don't want to get into the pros and cons of reactionaryism. Reactionary, is that a word? It's a word now. I'm coining that word, reactionaryism. How many more syllables can we add to a word? I'm sure that somebody out there will find the longest word and then try to make me pronounce it now. I'm not going to try, so don't bother looking it up. Regardless, though, now that we can establish kind of what the left is, which is just in comparison to the right, we can start going into the various tenets that we have. Now, I have talked about this before at length. I did another direct message, and I've got to get that thumbnail changed because these aren't direct messages anymore. These are live lectures. Anyway, I've talked about this already before because I've talked about how the left has organized themselves as much as a religion. That is to say that religions have tenets that they follow. They have preachers, they have priests, they have martyrs, they have saints. They have all of these things. And I went through that, and I thought I did a pretty good job there. However, one of two things is either true. Number one, not everybody is watching my videos. Which I find that to be just absolutely incomprehensible, because who wouldn't want to watch and listen to me? I don't get it either. The other thing is that they're not watching me, and they just kind of don't get it yet. And I'm honestly more inclined to believe the latter because it will save my fragile ego. And because it makes a lot more sense. I mean, most people are a little bit slower on the uptake, I think. Mostly because when it comes to things like critical thinking, first off, we haven't been teaching it. Most people in school, and this has been a complaint for decades now, have been told what to think and not how to think. They've been taught the answers to the questions that need to be asked and not taught how to ask questions themselves. And this has been a growing problem in schools for a long time, and the end result of that has been entire generations that have ceased to learn how to ask questions and to think beyond the immediate question before them. I've heard it mentioned from people that, I mean, perhaps we need to bring back things like chess in school. Why is that? Well, chess is a strategy game. We should bring back many strategy games. The reason being that they teach you to ask the question after the question. In terms of things like chess, they want you to ask, it's not just about what do I want to move now, but what will my opponent do after I've moved there? And after they've moved, how will I respond? It's the question after the question, after the question. And you need to be able to do things to operate critically, to think critically. And so that's what we're going to do here today, because I see every single day from various people around the internet, through YouTube, through Rumble, who talk about these issues, the culture war at hand, and they speak to the cult of leftism nowadays. I was even just having a conversation with somebody yesterday when I mentioned the lecture that I was going to have, and they thought that I was wrong. And I mean, think about that. Me being wrong about something? Impossible. No, but they thought that I was wrong about calling it a religion. They called it a cult, and they insisted that it's just a cult. And so, in order to properly go through this, I went through and did a little bit of research with the help of ChatGPT, just because, you know, I like it, and it's fun, and it helps me. And it saves me an absolute ton of time when it comes to research. So let me see if I can bring up a document here. It's not a big document, so don't be afraid. The big document is coming later. Be afraid of that one. So let's see. Properties, I want... Yes, that's it. That's perfect. Good. That's the one I wanted. And let's just move this up here where we can all see it. There we go. So I've got myself a document here, and I wanted to write down what is a cult, what is a religion, and then what will be considered an organized religion, because religion and organized religion are not necessarily the same thing. After all, if you happen to be Christian in some way, you're gonna have some issues there comparing your local church to that mega church down in Texas. What's his name? I can't remember his name now. His name doesn't matter. The point is, you know what I'm doing, or you know what I'm talking about. The giant stadium that is a church. And JP says the instant gratification lifestyle has also created a youth movement that just doesn't care. How do we survive that political future arena? All right. Let me go ahead and answer that for you. we can pause this for a minute. How do we survive that political future arena? The answer is, we don't. I mean, that's kind of a bad answer for you, but unfortunately, there is no fixing that. And I hate to go back to the black pill stream that I did, but this is one of the cases where the black pill is kind of the only pill. And the reason is, sorry, when you think about this... Oh, Joel Osteen. Yeah, that's the guy with the megachurch. Anyway, hold on. I need a drink. It's been a morning so far. I was literally writing notes all the way up to the point where I was supposed to get this started. What I need to do is get on that website where I can make these beautiful mind maps and have one of those instead. But anyway, how do we survive that future political arena? The fact is, we don't. The problem here is cultural. The idea of, as you say, delaying gratification. The instant gratification lifestyle has created this problem. The opposite of that, of course, is delayed gratification. But how do we get to the point of delayed gratification? Now, I'm sure many of us have heard of the marshmallow test. I think there's a more proper name for it, but I'm going to call it the marshmallow test. Where you would take a child and you would sit them down in a room, at a table, and you would put a marshmallow in front of them. The idea being you're testing their ability to defer gratification. You tell them they can have one marshmallow now. However, you're going to leave the room and get them another marshmallow. So if they can leave the marshmallow there on the table, when you come back, they can have 2 marshmallows. Alternately, though, if they eat the marshmallow, they will not get a second marshmallow. Now, the lizard part of your brain says, marshmallow, eat it. Coincidentally, that's also my brain. So I am lizard brain. But the idea is that delaying gratification is good, and it is beneficial to you. Now, this is not just a good principle in general because it nets you more marshmallows. It is also the entire basis of modern society. The reason being, and I've talked about this before when we covered the ideas of good and evil and evil. And for what it's worth, I do have a list of all the lectures that we're going to be referring to today. I just didn't have it on this page. However, I could probably put it on this page. Hold on. Let me see if I can copy this over. Let me go here. Let me copy this. Copy and come down here. Should just paste in, right? Well, yes. Yes, it does. It's super tiny. Let's see if I can make it bigger. No, that didn't help. That does not help. Undo that. Okay, well, I apparently can't make that any bigger. I can make the entire page bigger, though. There we go. That is ridiculously oversized, but at least now it's legible. So, I mean, these are the things that we're going to be referring to today. So, if you ever want to go back and reference previous discussions that I've done on these subjects, there you go. But when we covered the subject of good and evil evil itself, we talked about things like greed and gluttony. And we talked about how these are antithetical to a future prosperity. If you're greedy and you just kind of keep everything to yourself and don't share anything, then sooner or later nobody else will have anything. You'll spend your entire life just collecting things. Your relationships will fall apart, your society will fall apart, and it's just over. Similarly, gluttony. If you eat all of your seed crop, then you shall have no seeds for the future. You will be instantly gratified. But because you could not defer your gratification at all, then later on you will have none. That's just all there is to it. So when we talk about how do we survive the future political arena, well, the answer is we don't, because we have not cultivated a culture capable of laying down that future. Because we did not teach deferred gratification, because we did not encourage that, we don't have it anymore. And so now that nobody is delaying gratification, well, they're kind of too old now to start teaching them. They're not interested in learning delayed gratification. They know they want it. They have the means to get it. And so they will get it. Think about those people who live on those check advancing places. The loan shops where you can go in and you can get an advance on your paycheck. Because these are not typical bank loans, they're also not subject to the typical bank loan rules. They are just this side of being loan sharks. And even then, sometimes they will put a toe over that line into actual criminal territory because they can charge upwards of, I think, 99% of your check's loan amount. I lost my words there for a minute. Either way, the point is, they will give you the loan for the balance of your paycheck and then charge you almost double to pay it back. The end result of this is that you get your money now, but in the long run, you get poorer and poorer. And of course, once you get on that ball and you get that rolling, there is no getting off. Come the next week, you're worse off than you were before. You need to get the money now. You go back there, you keep doing it. And every single time you get a little bit more in the hole. Instant gratification is the same way. In order for them to do this, in order for them to stop the problems here, they would have to delay it. And that means hardship. That means pain and suffering in the short term. The biggest thing that I like to look at, of course, going back to money, is the U.S. national debt. The U.S. has an enormous national debt, not to other countries, but to itself, because the U.S. has a certain amount of GDP. Every state has GDP, the nation itself has GDP. Now, in any normal household, that would be your budget. But the U.S. is not your average household. The U.S. is different because, well, actually, they're not different. They just think they are. Because they think they can just print the money and that'll be good. But it's not. And the answer, the reason why this isn't going to work is because sooner or later the bill will come due. It will either come due in the idea that we finally get our act together and we just say, that's it, fixed budget now. Which means that a lot of people are going to suffer. Or, and this is why I tell you, JP, that you can't. If the people who are in charge cannot do this, if they cannot step up and take on the hardship, then it will be thrust upon them when it breaks, when the economic system falls apart, and then they have no choice. Then they will have to. Then they will fix it, because there will literally be no other option. They will go for the instant gratification only to find out that the instant gratification is not there. And then once they are stripped of all other options, they will learn to delay gratification. And once they learn to delay gratification, it will force them into critical thinking, because they will have to say, if I want to eat tomorrow, I will have to make a series of choices today. And those people who find themselves incapable of making those choices and thinking critically will not eat tomorrow. And they will not eat the day after. And sooner or later, they will not eat ever. It's a grisly prospect. It's not called the black pill for no reason. The point is, eventually, nature will rear its ugly head, and it will force people to abide by it. Reality does not have a bias, except that reality wants you dead. And ain't nobody in history has ever figured out how to conquer that one. Reality wants you dead. The universe wants you dead. You can put it off, but it will win eventually. That is how we fix this. Now, just in case that wasn't the answer to your question, you asked how do we survive that future political arena? If that's what you're asking, just how to survive it, not actually how to fix it, well, the answer is actually very simple. Self-sufficiency. Which I am the last person to talk about, because I am absolutely not self-sufficient. I'm actually in a lot of trouble. I cannot support myself. So, yeah. That being said, I'm also not dumb. I do recognize that self-sufficiency is the way to go. Now, I'm not going to go out and be like some other people when they say self-sufficiency means you have to have your cabin out in the woods. You have to have your acreage. You need to have your own solar panels. You need to have your own cows, chickens, pigs, things like that. You need to have, an acre of land to farm your own food. You need to learn how to can, how to preserve, how to dry, smoke, all of that stuff. And that is good. I will say that is all very good. And if you can do that, I encourage you to do that. But self-sufficiency doesn't have to exclusively mean that. Sometimes it just means being inside of a community that can take care of itself. Do you know your neighbors? Do you live in an area with farmers? Do you know them? Do you get food from them already? Do you have skills that they can use? Do you have any way that you can barter? Do you own shelter? Do you own guns for self-defense? Do you have either the supplies or the access to the supplies that you might need? Or do you have skills that are workable, are profitable, that you can turn into something? That is ultimately how you survive. That's how you survive anything. That's how you survive political unrest. That's how you survive civil unrest. It's how you survive the post-apocalypse, if you're into that kind of thing. JP says, ew, neighbors. And I agree. Neighbors are gross, but get to know them. If for no other reason, as I told my grandfather once, be nice to your neighbors. You may have to eat them someday. So anyway, self-sufficiency doesn't necessarily have to mean you and only you. It can also mean you and your community. But that's how you survive anything. That also means how you survive things like religious upheaval, which is going to bring us right back into what we were discussing now. So let me shrink this back down to a more manageable size. There we go. So when we talk about leftism, progressivism, things like that, I hear from a lot of people over and over and over and over again every day that it's a cult. Especially from Tim Pool. And I mean, as much as I do like that I follow Tim Pool and I listen to what he says, he always harps on about the same thing. It's a cult, it's a cult, it's a cult. And it's like, my man, you're not dumb. I get it. You're not a dumb person, but you are a little slow. Because I'll tell you the same thing that I told the other person the other day I was talking about, and if Tim Pool ever sees this, I'd like to address him directly. It's not a cult. It's not. How do I know this? I brought notes. I have definitions. Okay. So now that I've got some definitions and I have some examples, JP says he's sensationalizing. Well, if he's sensationalizing, he's doing it wrong, because if he sensationalized the way I do it, he could sensationalize a lot more. Anyway, cults. Now, I have some examples here. I've got the People's Temple, which if you go back and watch my Pokemon video, weird that I'm referring to that one, actually, but go back and watch the Pokemon video. I actually did mention a couple of these cults, because one of the Pokemon games had cults in it. I know, weird, but it happened. So we've got the People's Temple, we've got Heaven's Gate, we've got the Manson family. These were all famous cults in U.S. history. I can't necessarily speak to other nations' histories because I'm not a big history person, and I don't know other countries that well. But when we look to the cult, okay, what does a cult have? Let's check these things off. Devotion to a charismatic leader. Now, does that really sound like leftism? No, it does not. They do not have a charismatic leader. To a certain extent, I'm not even sure if they have leaders. And I'm not even sure necessarily how charismatic any of them are. Their leaders have followings, whether they be political leaders or cultural leaders, whatever they are, and their followers are fervent, but they don't have one, and like I said, their charisma is debatable. But I will give you that they do have followers, so they have to have something there. Emphasis on group cohesion and loyalty. Now this one I'll absolutely give them. When we talk about leftism as a religion or a cult, they absolutely have an emphasis on group cohesion and loyalty, to the point where they will turn on each other like jackals. Actually, that's not fair. Jackals are very nice to each other. What's a better example? They'll turn each other like Tasmanian devils. Tasmanian devils are mean. As soon as somebody puts a toe out of line, they have a zero tolerance policy for anyone who is not absolutely with them. You're either with them or you are against them, and it doesn't take much to be against them. So, okay, why don't we go ahead and we'll say this one. I should have... here we go. Highlighting. That's pink. Red. Okay. And then this one, high degree of loyalty. Let's highlight this one in green. Okay. Separation from mainstream society and beliefs. Now that's a really easy one to go into, because are they separate from mainstream society? Oh, no, they are not. No. You cannot turn a corner without finding something from them. Whether it be pride, whether it be transgenderism, whether it be feminism, whether it be anything under their umbrella, you cannot go anywhere without seeing it. To the point where they have entire national events that last for over a month. And what I'm referring to here is, there is National Women's Month, there is National Pride Month, there are national groups, like the Pink Ribbon Foundation and other things like that, who have public support. They get national grants, they have everything. So separation from the mainstream society and beliefs? Absolutely not. Unorthodox or non-traditional beliefs and practices. Now, this one is a little bit harder to really diagnose, so we may have to kind of give this one a little bit of both. Unorthodox and non-traditional beliefs and practices. Well, that kind of goes with being separate from the mainstream society. If you're separate from mainstream society, then you would be, by definition, non-traditional. And by anyone in the Conservative Party, you would call them non-traditional. But are they unorthodox? Well, it's hard to say, because so much of this has been ingrained in society. Once upon a time, it would have been considered unorthodox to hang a rainbow flag underneath the American flag. Now, however, we see that quite often. It would be considered non-traditional to dedicate an entire month to women, but we see that very often now. And it would be extremely non-traditional to do things like gender-affirming care or sex changes to children. But this is also growing in popularity and has the mainstream support of entire states. So, can we really say that they don't have this? I'm not entirely certain that I'm going to put it as a green. Maybe a yellow. I'll give them half credit for it, because a lot of people do still regard it as being non-traditional. A high degree of control over its members. I would say absolutely yes, mostly because they do police each other. If you do not do as the group says, you will be punished by the group. So we're going to go ahead and we'll give them the green. Use of mind control or manipulation tactics. Okay? I don't think they use mind control too much. Manipulation, yes. Mind control? Does mind control even exist? It's all manipulation tactics, but do they use them? I will go ahead and give them the green light on this one. They are very manipulative. They tend to pick on people who are explicitly ostracized or downtrodden or things like that. They target people who are vulnerable to manipulation. They target children who are both mentally incapable of defending themselves against the arguments of an adult, and they target children who have been subject to bullying or depression or things like that. Then there's often associated with extreme or abusive behavior. This one again is hard to answer, because it depends on who you ask. If you were to ask the conservatives, are they associated with extreme or abusive behavior, they would say yes. I will go back to child sex changes. Is that abusive? I think it is. I tend to also be very conservative, and so of course I do. But if you were to ask anyone in the state of, say, California, at least in Southern California, or at least in the cities of Southern California, they would absolutely disagree. If you would ask pretty much anyone in any city, because all cities tend to be very liberal, they would disagree. And given that they have the support of government and the support of hospitals to go ahead and do that, I cannot give this the green or the red. We have to put this as a yellow. And so now if we take a look at this and we just add these up, we've got 2 points against it, 3 points for it, and then we'll give 1 point to each side. So that means we've got roughly 4 points for, 3 points against. That would be pretty much, what we would say, okay, it's a cult, right? We're done. It's a cult. We've got it. We've secured it. All right, Tim Pool's right. Shadowcat's wrong. Nah. No, we're not done yet. Now we move down to religion. Now, I have often heard leftism and progressivism referred to as the secular religion, and that's what we're going to be operating under today. So when we look at religion, so religion is a worship of a divine or supernatural power. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add something else onto this, because obviously they do not worship a supernatural power. But it has been pointed out that these people hold the state to be the highest authority in the land. So long as it agrees with them, at least. I never said they were consistent, just that they did it. So we look at this and we supplant God with the state. Do they worship the state? They absolutely do. Everything the state says is gospel. And anybody who does not worship the state is guilty. Guilty of what? We'll get to in a minute. Belief in a set of moral and ethical principles. Okay? Does the left believe in a set of moral and ethical principles? Well, again, morals and ethics tend to be subjective. But if we look through this through the subjectivity of their own lens, they do believe that white people are born with an original sin. They do believe in collective guilt. They do believe in intersectionality, which means that your guilt is based upon the intersection of all your various physical and spiritual properties. They believe in redistributionism, taking from those who are guilty to give to those who have been injured. They have a very long list of moral and ethical principles that they abide by on a daily basis. And every day they push to get their beliefs, their morals, enshrined into laws where they can then further be enforced. So do they believe in a set of moral and ethical principles? Yes. Often organized around a particular text or scripture. This is going to be the first hard part that we have, because they are not around a singular or particular one, at least. While they do have many books, things like Gender Queer or the DSM-5, or are they on the 6 yet? I forget. They have many books that they will refer to and use as evidence or use to proselytize their beliefs to others. Much as a Christian would cite the Bible as the reasoning for their actions, or a Muslim would cite the Quran for theirs. These people will cite medical text, studies, surveys, meta-analysis, all of these things to defend things like the wage gap in feminism, or the need for further legal protections for LGBTQ people because of past discrimination, or the need for child sex changes because of other studies that they've done. So while it may not be a single or particular text, they do have things that they use as scripture. So that's going to be a green light. The involvement in rituals, ceremonies, or other practices. As I pointed out, while Christianity may have Easter and Christmas, and Islam has Ramadan and something else, I can't remember what it is. For the left, they have Women's Month, they have Pride Month, they have days that they will recognize. For example, they recognize, what is it, May 29th, I think, now, as being a day of silence, a day of remembrance for George Floyd. They also have others for, I think, what was his name? Either way, any of these people who have been killed in various different things, each one of them has basically been ascended to a sainthood, and the day that they died has been turned into a day of remembrance. Well, that's also what Easter is. Technically, no. Technically, that'd be Good Friday. Good Friday would be the equivalent. But Good Friday is also recognized as a day of remembrance, a day of worship. Many people will take that day off so that they can practice. They do have rituals, ceremonies, and other practices. That's a green light. Can be monotheistic, polytheistic, or pantheistic. If you're not familiar with the words, just very quickly, monotheistic means that you have one god. Polytheistic means that you have many gods, such as up here, Hinduism. Hinduism has many gods. Or pantheistic, which means that you just kind of believe in everything as a god, I think. Or you believe in all gods equally. It's kind of muddy. Pan anything is kind of muddy. They are not necessarily monotheistic because they don't have a god, but again, they worship the state. They get their permissions from the state, they get their privileges from the state, they get their power from the state, they get their justification from the state. The state gives them everything. I have to give this one to them. Now, here's the kicker. The one thing that generally separates a cult from a religion, often recognized by society and has a long history and tradition. This is what separates it, because under cult, and we have it up here in red, separation from mainstream society and belief, these two things are polar opposites. Just as I said that this has been ingrained in society, that's not all. It says often recognized by society and has a long history and tradition. That last part's actually very interesting. First off, I'm going to throw Scientology under a big bus here. Scientology is a recognized religion. Scientology was born in like the 1990s, I think. I think it is regarded as one of the youngest religions in the world, along with Pastafarianism. And one of those is actually taken seriously. But if we can call Scientology a religion, despite the fact that it's very, very young, the idea of homosexual movements and the idea of women's movements and everything else goes back a lot farther than that. When it comes to the whole LGBTQ thing, it has its roots going all the way back to the 1960s and 70s in Western democracy. That was when, or after the civil rights era, when we started to see a big push towards the normalization of homosexuals and other queer folk in normal society. It took a long time for it to catch on, and they weren't actually brought under the umbrella of the anti-discrimination stuff until I think the early 90s. But regardless, you can trace that back to the 60s and 70s. As far as the women's movements, those go back much further, where they primarily got their start in the early teens and 20s in the United States. That was when you had things like women's suffrage. And when you talk about the idea of racial movements, that goes back, hold on. Let's see, divide by 7, carry the 9, multiply by the square root of pi. Oh yeah, forever. Literally forever. Because so long as human beings have been on the planet, they have had some kind of racial strife that they've been fighting for. So, long history? Oh yeah. And not only a long history, but they've been trying to rewrite it, to make it more favorable to themselves. I would put up, for example, things like the 1619 Project, which tries to rewrite United States history to say that the United States actually was founded in the year 1619 by colonists who brought slaves to the U.S. to escape Britain, who was trying to outlaw slavery. Of course, this is absolutely ridiculous, but these people believe it because, of course, this is their scripture, and scripture cannot be argued with. So, recognized by society, we already got that. It's recognized on the national level. And long history, getting longer every day. That's 6 for 6 under religion. So let's move down a little bit. Then we get to organized religion. And when we talk about the difference between religion and organized religion, I had to kind of think about this one myself. What is the difference? And the difference is kind of the strictness of it. After all, Christianity is like the biggest religion in the world. I would wager that most of the people in my audience, which isn't even very big, I'd wager that most of the people in my audience are probably Christian to some degree, and I would wager a lot of those people probably also go to church. But with one important caveat. I would wager that most of the churches these people go to tend to be very small. And when I say small, I mean a congregation of maybe a few dozen to a couple hundred people. These are going to be much more lax in the way they do their ceremonies. They're going to be a lot more forgiving. They're also going to be a lot more interconnected because of that. As opposed to when you go to a place like, I don't know, let's just pick the Vatican, okay? It's an easy target because it's Catholic. And the cathedrals there are enormous, to the point where, as I understand it, and I might be wrong about this, the Pope gives a service from the cathedral. However, he doesn't even do it in the cathedral because there's just not enough room in it. He preaches to an open circle where people can just stand. It's massive. So there's a big difference there between a religion and an organized religion. So let's go through these. Number 1, has an established hierarchy, institutions, and practices that are codified and regulated. These would be things like in Christianity, things like baptism, things like confirmation. Does the leftist, do the progressives have an established hierarchy, institutions, and practices codified and regulated? The answer to that is a firm maybe. It's actually hard to nail it down. Let's break it down. Do they have an established hierarchy? Actually, they do. And it's because of intersectionality. The intersectionality gives them this hierarchy because they can divide up everything and then order it as a ladder. When they look at a person, they say, number 1, what is your gender? Which used to be a lot easier than it is now. However, while there may be 67 genders now, I think, there is three very important ones. Number 1, if you are male, you go on the bottom. If you are female, you go on top of male. But if you are neither, you go on top of female. Then, of course, you have race. And there are many races out there, but if we just look at most, like the big ones, we'll just say white, black, Asian, Hispanic, because that's the easiest ones that I know of over here in North America. If you're white, you go on the bottom. If you're Asian, you go on top of white. If you're Hispanic, you go on top of Asian, and if you're black, you go on top of Hispanic. Then if we can blend these together with the sexes, you get a more complex ladder. And then we can add in all kinds of different intersections to further build that ladder and create a hierarchy where we know that one person is privileged over another, one person has more authority over another. So do they have an established hierarchy? They absolutely do. Next, do they have institutions? And this is actually a very easy one because if you pay attention to any of the cultural news, we've been talking about institutional capture for a very, very long time now. Do they have institutions? Yes. They have schools, whether these be elementary schools, high schools, colleges, or universities. They have their institutions where only their beliefs are acceptable and any other beliefs are punished. They have their own hospitals where they will perform whatever operations or treatments they need, and if you disagree with them, you will not work there. They have entire governments where any deviation from what is known as, or what is doctrine will get you censured, will get you censored, and it will get you punished and removed. So do they have institutions? They absolutely do. And that is to say nothing of the media. In fact, if this stream doesn't get censored, I will be absolutely shocked. And so if anything happens to the stream while it's going on, go ahead and let me know, because I'll be very curious about that. I'm not even a very big YouTuber, but I know that they watch this stuff like a hawk. And do they have practices that are codified? That one is a little bit harder, but at the same time, yes, they do. Because when we talk about practices, what kind of practices do we mean? Well, it's kind of a broad term, but what if we talk about legal practices? Well, they absolutely do. Whenever something happens between people of mixed races, they go back to that hierarchy to determine who was higher and who was lower on the hierarchy, and they assign guilt or innocence based upon the hierarchy. When it comes to the idea of gender identity and expression, they have practices where they try to identify how somebody's gender expression dictates how they should live their life, and then how they need to be treated to emphasize how they should live their life. So in that way, we can say that they absolutely do have practices. We're going to greenlight that. Next, often has official clergy or religious leaders who oversee the religious practices and rituals of the faithful. This one is a little bit harder because, as we established above under cults, they do not have a devotion to a single charismatic leader. In fact, their leadership is a little bit kinda scattered in general. But that doesn't mean that they don't have it. There are people out there who do function as sort of an official clergy for them. And when I say clergy or religious leaders, I'm talking about people in government, people in Congress, people on committees, people in courts. It's not hard to take a look at recent news. Donald Trump is in many court trials right now because he's being accused of many things. And one of the things that you'll notice if you watch any of them is how extremely biased the courts are against him. How extremely biased the judges are, how extremely biased the prosecution is, to the point where it's actually a problem. And I don't mean a problem in the way you probably think. Many people believe, and I'm one of them, that he's not getting a fair shake. And that's a problem because he could be guilty as sin. The problem is that because they are so zealously going after him, nobody believes it. He could be guilty of 100 different things, but because of the absolute hatred for him, nobody believes that it's an authentic case. Nobody believes the evidence. And so these people could be regarded as simply being clergy for the left. Instead of having their official positions, they are just simply inquisitors, looking to assess not whether he is or is not guilty, but just how guilty he is. Then you have people who are in the media, people like CNN, MSNBC, these places, who will absolutely lie so long as it protects their side, or they will lie to harm the other side. Or you have people on places like here, YouTube, who have entire channels dedicated to this kind of thing. They do not oversee necessarily religious practices or rituals of the faithful, but they are still leaders. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'll give this one half credit. I'll put it as a yellow. Next, often associated with formalized religious institutions such as churches, synagogues, mosques, or temples. Do they have these things? Technically, no. And Tuxedo is in the chat and says, Shadowcat is guilty. Throw him in the pit. Well, how dare you assume my gender? Throw you in the pit. Okay, so often associated with formalized religious churches, synagogues, mosques, or temples. They do not necessarily have churches, synagogues, mosques, or temples, not in the same way. Because while they do not have a building where they will go to for a regular worship, that does not necessarily mean that they do not have something similar. They do say that church is wherever a group of people are discussing God. I've always disagreed with that definition, although I do understand where they're coming from it. If we were to go by their definition, then technically we're in church right now, and I assure you, we are not in church. The reason being, I'm not on fire, so we can't be. But that doesn't mean that they do not have certain formalized associations. When you go to places like colleges, universities, things like that, or you just go to certain very leftist areas, you will find that they do have regular meetings. They have people who will get together and they will discuss things that are going on in their area. They will discuss plans and strategies for how to further enshrine their power, things like that. Tuxedo says Twitter is their church, and actually that's a really good point. That is one that I hadn't really thought to consider. Online, their church could be the internet. Now granted, they have to share their church with a lot of people, but when we talk about things like Twitter, when we talk about things like what was that other place? I can't remember it now. It's not a place that I went. That's why I don't remember it. So I don't have a whole lot of familiarity with it. But they have different websites. They have different platforms, different places they will go to gather, to share their faith, to share everything. It's formalized. It is kind of an institution. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a yellow too. It may not be as formal as an actual church, but it is kind of formalized. So let's move on. Next. May have a structured system of religious education or training. Oh, hell to the yes. When you look at what they have been doing in schools, or not just in schools, but in any kind of auxiliary school. So whether it is the public school system, whether it's a private school system, whether it is some kind of special education alongside the education system, they're in it. And not only are they in it, but they are rewriting the what's the word I want for this? The syllabus for education on a daily basis. To the point where, back in the 90s, we had a great big fit over whether or not we should even have sex education in schools. And now, they have rewritten that to the extent where we now have sex education and demonstration in K through 6 schools, where we bring up the idea of homosexual sex and the idea of toys and touching in as low as kindergarten. So yes, they do have a structured system of education and training. And of course, when we get up into the higher echelons, into places like colleges and universities, what is the primary export of these colleges and universities? It is educators who can go on to teach others the same thing. This is where the joke comes in of what do you do with a degree in women's studies? The answer is simple. You go on to teach more people about women's studies so that they can go on and teach more people about women's studies. So this is absolutely a green light. Now, next, often has a formalized system of governance and decision making. Now, this one actually seems a bit tricky at first, but it's a green light. And I'll tell you why. Do they have a formalized system of governance? No, they don't. Do they have a formalized system of decision making? Actually, yes, they do. And it's going to feed back into that system of governance, because who governs the progressives? It's not senators. It's not doctors. It's not even cultural leaders. It's themselves. Every single decision made by the progressives is made by the whole. Because if you are trying to decide whether you should or should not do a thing, it depends on how the rest of the group will regard what you're doing. If this is something that is in line with their ideals, then they will approve of it, and thus you should do it. But if it won't, and you know that if you do this thing, that they will reject you, then you don't. As such, every single decision made by the whole, or made inside the whole, is made by the whole. That's a green light. And the last one, perhaps the easiest one of all, may have a significant political or social influence within society. I dare anyone to tell me that the leftist progressives do not have a significant political or social influence within Western society. I dare you. I don't even need to go into the details of it, because we already know. And so now when we look at this, I think that we can really ascertain, where does it stand? Is progressivism a cult, or is it a religion? The answer is, it is absolutely a religion. And it has almost everything to call itself an organized religion on par with Christianity, Islam, Judaism, or I have Hinduism labeled here, but I don't know how they feel about it. It is not a cult. However, more importantly, it started as a cult. And this is why I say that people like Tim Pool are not dumb, but they're slow. The problem with Tim Pool has always been, and the problem with many people in his ilk, people like The Quartering, people like the Daily Wire, people like, I don't know, just people in that general area. The problem with them is they've always been one step behind. And I'll be honest, that's why I started doing these lectures, is because I kept seeing that they're always one step behind. And it's like, I don't know why you can't see this the same way I do. So I started doing these saying, if I'm seeing this and I keep being proven right by it, the least I can do is help other people to catch up to here, because if we can keep up, maybe we can get ahead of it. That's where that critical thinking comes in. It started off as a cult, okay? It started off as things like gay rights groups who would say, you know, we're going to form a gay rights group, okay? We have one person who is very charismatic and they say, we should do this thing. Let's get everyone together who feels the same way as we do and let's go protest for something, okay? It was a small group, and let's be honest, the things that they were protesting for generally were not bad. People who wanted things like I don't want to say equal representation, just equal treatment. People who were saying that we want things like don't ask, don't tell removed from the military. I'm kind of okay with that. The idea being that you could not be homosexual and serve in the military. Well, I feel the same way about gays serving in the military as I do about women serving in the military. As it turns out, bullets don't care who pulls the trigger. A bullet from a woman is just as deadly as a bullet from a man. And if it were up to me, I would put a rifle in literally everyone's hands. Because at the end of the day, yeah, if we're at war, we're all at war. But that's where it kind of went wrong, because after they got the tolerance they wanted, then they started to push further and further, and suddenly it wasn't just one charismatic leader they were following, it was several. And it wasn't just some little, you know, niche thing where they were asking for. They wanted to be integrated into mainstream society. It was there that this whole separation from mainstream society started to really dissolve. When I talked about the examples that I have up here, I want to mention them for a minute. If you watch my Pokemon video, this is going to be a little bit of review for you. If you didn't, though, the People's Temple, Heaven's Gate, and the Manson family. We didn't cover Heaven's Gate in the Pokemon video, and I actually had to look that one up. But the People's Temple was organized around James Jones or something like that. Anyway. He was just a really charismatic guy, okay? People loved him. And so people flocked to him. And, you know, this was a guy that had an ego about the size of Jupiter. And so as more people joined his cult, it actually kind of threw off the gravity of the solar system. Point being, though, that eventually, once he had a whole bunch of people following him and he really didn't need to do anything, he started to segregate his little cult from society. He didn't want society involved with him. He didn't really want to be involved in society, except when it came to recruiting more people into his cult. And eventually, when it all fell apart, well, he poisoned the Kool-Aid. Heaven's Gate was also very similar, except they kind of believed that humans were put here by aliens, or we were like heavenly beings. And so they believed that death was not death, it was ascension to something greater. At any rate, they were regarded as wacky, and eventually they did kill themselves with a combination of barbiturates and vodka. The Manson family, of course, thought that they were basically white supremacists, and they thought they were going to start a race war. They called it Helter Skelter. Their entire cult was like a dozen people. They didn't get very far, but they did kill several people, so, you know, that happened. Point is that these people were all on the outskirts of society. Nobody wanted to associate with them, and people even tried to stop them. However, the left is not that. They are not on the outskirts of society anymore. They are a part of everything. And now that they're a part of everything, they have nowhere to go but up. We've already seen that they meet every single checkbox for an actual religion. And they meet 4 of the 6 for an organized religion, with 2 of them being just a little bit iffy. This is why when I talked about the coming Civil War, and I hear people talk about Civil War all the time, especially Tim Pool. because sometimes he just will not shut up about it. I like to remind people we're not hitting for a civil war. We never have been. There is no civil war that's brewing inside the United States. The reason we had a civil war the last time is because we actually did have states versus states. And that was just the US Civil War, which was not exemplary of normal civil wars. Normal civil wars are a whole bunch of groups fighting for control of the government. In the case of the American Civil War, it was kind of different because we had two governments. And we had one group that was fighting to be independent from the other government, and one that said, no, we're going to unite everyone under one government. Guess who won? So, that was the Civil War in the US. In other civil wars, like the Civil War in Spain, you had, I think it was 6 or 7 different groups that were all vying for power. Otherwise, you have things like coups, where there is no war and you just, roll up, execute the entire government at hand, and take their place. So people like to say the US is heading for a civil war, but we're not. And this is where I go back to another discussion I did previously, and I really should have put those up here. I didn't, but I should have. Well, no, I did. It's over here. Let me zoom in. I talked about civil war in a previous discussion because we're not in one. What we are in is a holy war. And when I say holy war, that brings back a lot of people to thinking about, oh, look, the Crusades. Okay, and you're not wrong. You have to understand that the Crusades was a very long period of time, and it was not just the Crusades. It was the Crusades and the Jihads. To make it very, very simplified, to an insulting degree for both sides. What happened was you had Christianity in Europe, and you had Islam in the Middle East. And then you had Jerusalem in the middle, which is why they keep fighting over it. But what happened was you had Islam who came up to the north side of the Mediterranean all the way to Spain and said, hello, we are Islam. You are now going to be Islam. And the Christians, they kind of said no. And so they kind of massacred the Muslims and chased them all the way back down to the Middle East. And when they got back down to the Middle East, they didn't stop there because they said, you want to make us Muslims? No, 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 no. We're making you Christians now. And the Muslims took offense to that. And so they chased the Crusaders all the way back up to Europe, and that was the Crusades. They went back and forth fighting over territory because they would basically chase one back to their home territory. They would get stopped, the other side would chase them back down, get stopped, and then they would go back again. And of course, Jerusalem got caught in the middle. Every time that, one group would come through and liberate it from the other group, well, people died, things got burned down, it was a bad time for everybody that lived in Jerusalem. So, like I said, that is the Crusades in a very, very small nutshell. It's not even a peanut. Okay, very small shell. But still, that was a holy war. That was a war between Christianity and Islam. And the reason it wasn't over necessarily territory, it wasn't over anything like that. Sure, land was involved. Everybody wants land. I want some land. But the land was incidental. The real goal of these holy wars was conversion or extermination. Both sides wanted the same thing. You follow my religion and stop your heresy. And this is where I want to bring you back to something else. Okay? We're gonna switch to something else here. I'm gonna bring this back down here. go over here, and we are going to go to... here. Okay? New page. See? I told you there was a much, much scarier one. You didn't believe me, did you? Alright. So, if I can move this enough. That's too far. I can't make it fit. Can I do it that way? Not really. How do I make this fit? There we go. That's good enough, actually. So when I talk about the Holy War, what are we talking about? Well, I had to look some of these up because I didn't know all of them, but we're going to go through each one of them. The first one, of course, is heresy. Now, anybody who is familiar with Warhammer 40k knows heresy. Kind of a big thing there. But for those of you who are not into the whole tabletop thing, heresy, beliefs or opinions that go against the official or accepted doctrine of a particular religion. Now, as we've already established, progressivism is a religion, okay? We have proved it empirically. Okay, maybe not empirically, but it's close. And of course, as I pointed out at the beginning of that entire thing, the left does not like heresy. If you are not with them, you are against them. And they are very, very quick to remove their own people. They do like to say that the left always eats their own, and this is true. Tux says, I know heresy. She's cool. Okay, well, I definitely know which army you're playing then. Anyway, though, the left does not tolerate heresy at all. Now, the funny thing is, actually, Christianity does. Christianity and Judaism actually do tolerate heresy. Islam does not tolerate it. Islam is very public about how they do not tolerate heresy. Although they are actually, believe it or not, they are not as fast to punish heresy as progressivism is. Now granted, the punishments from Islam are severe, where heresy can actually be punished by anything up to and including death. However, progressivism, while we can't really prove it, yeah, the idea of heresy under progressivism is kinda punishable by anything up to and including death. And even though they refuse to release the manifesto for it, I'm going to go right back to the Tennessee school shooting. I forget what the name of the school was. However, it was a Catholic, or at least a Christian school that was shot up by a trans person. Now, while they will not release the manifesto, it does not take a huge leap of logic and reasoning for us to assume what's in that manifesto. Because if it was good for them, they would have released it already. This was, of course, punishment for heresy. Next, we go down. Blasphemy. The act of speaking disrespectfully or profanely about a deity or sacred thing. I don't think that I need to go too much into this one because we have seen what happens whenever a conservative speaker goes to a college campus or a school or even just goes outside to something like a park. It does not take long for their event, whatever kind of speaking event it might be, to be protested, to be disrupted, to be punished in some way, up to and including sometimes violence and, well, threats and violence. And when I say threats and violence, I do mean violence against people on the ground, and threats such as shootings, bombings, burnings, anything like that. Blasphemy is absolutely a thing in progressivism, and it is punished accordingly. Next is apostasy. Apostasy is the act of renouncing or abandoning one's religious faith or belief. Again, this is one that I do not think needs a great deal of explanation because it would not be hard for any of us to go out and find numerous examples of people who have, as they say, left the plantation. And it came to be known as left the plantation because it was primarily black people at first who were watching what the left was doing before progressivism really even took over. But when they saw what things like the Democrats in the US were doing to black people, the way Democrats seem to be in control of all the cities, but all the cities seem to be getting worse for black people. How there's always been these big pushes to correct things like bad policing, which harms black people, but it also never seems to get better. All of these things were happening to black people. The Democrats kept saying they were going to fix it. It never got fixed, and they said, you know what? I'm not going to support you anymore. And what happened? Those people were accosted. They were threatened. They were called Uncle Toms or black white supremacists. And it's only gotten worse from there. When it got to the LGBTQ community, you had gays and lesbians who were very much on board with everything. However, when feminism really got into the idea of promoting itself, it got to the point where even gay men were regarded as not being progressive enough, and thus gay men became part of the problem. Also, we have somebody new in the chat. Hello, Bad Bod. I don't think I've seen you before, but good to have you here. You were thinking this was religion on RimWorld. No. However, that does give me some ideas. Could you imagine if we tried to make a progressive religion in RimWorld? I'm not even sure if we could. I'm not sure if RimWorld is crazy enough for it. Anyway, though, as feminism really took over in the LGBTQ community, gay men got the boot. And after that, well, what happened when things like trans took over? When trans really started to take over inside the LGBT community, well, then women got the boot. Why? Because, well, as it turns out, lesbians like females. And they're not exactly big on the idea of trans females, especially pre-op trans females. And Bad Bot says, hello French viewers here. Well, bonjour, hello French viewers. Again, that's the extent of the French you're getting from me because I don't know that much. I don't even know enough French to order myself a Big Mac. But anyway, back to the subject of apostasy. All of these people who got kicked out then looked at what happened to the movement that they were supporting, that some of them helped build, and they said, well, wait a minute. This goes absolutely antithetical to everything that I was working towards. And that's why you ended up with groups like Gays Against Groomers, who said, you know, there's a lot of people that are coming in here who like to say they're gay, but they're targeting things like children, and we're not down for that. And instantly, apostates. When you had women who said that we don't want trans people here, apostates. They were called TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists. Trans exclusionary because they don't want trans people, and radical because suddenly they were too extreme for the LGBTQ movement. No, they were now far right. They were way too conservative for what the movement had become. And what's happened? They have been denounced. They have been attacked in the media and the institutions. They've been attacked personally online with people doxing their information, showing up at their houses. The most famous example right now is probably, what's her name? J.K. Rowling, who has very famously come out and said, women are women. And just because you have surgery, it does not make you a woman. And of course, that made J.K. Rowling the absolute queen of TERFs. Even though J.K. Rowling was never a real big feminist to begin with. I mean, she was female, she was all on board for like women's rights and stuff, but she was never really feminist. But now she's lumped into them because, well, she's an apostate, and all apostates can go into the same garbage can. So, progressivism absolutely has apostasy. But now we get into a very interesting one. The idea of schisms. So a schism refers to a split or division within a religious group, often a result of differing beliefs or interpretations. This one is kind of hard to really talk about because, well, progressivism is already schismatic. When we talk about progressivism, it already has its little sects. You have the LGBTQ sect. You have the trans sect. You have the feminist sect. You have the racial sect. So it's already kind of schismatic to begin with. The problem is, however, that because of intersectionality, they all overlap. And because they all overlap, sometimes you get schisms inside. So you'll get things like trans people, trans females who will say that, you know, all lesbians have to love the trans people. And now you have a split between lesbians and trans lesbians. And that schism does not like each other. You have many schisms inside of it. Although it does still all remain kind of united for the most part. Next, the idea of idolatry. So the worship of idols or other objects instead of the true deity, or in a particular religion. I would not say that progressivism is necessarily guilty of idolatry, so much as they kind of promote it. It's weird because finding a definition for idolatry is actually kind of... It's kind of hard. And the reason why it's kind of hard is because if you look at, say, Christianity, okay? Part of Christianity, and we have it right here, because we're going to go through this. We've got the 5 pillars of Islam, and we've got the 10 commandments for both Judaism and Christianity. Number 2 is, under Christianity, you shall not make for yourself an idol or worship any other gods. Now that's been a contentious issue, because if you cannot have idols, what do you call a shrine? As a matter of fact, in a church, you often have many statues and shrines for various saints, and it's not that hard to find somebody who is at least Christian who has a crucifix or a Christ on the crucifix hanging in their home. I'm not even, I'm not even religious, and even I've got a couple of those hanging around here. Why? Because somebody else had them. Somebody else gave them to me, or they belong to family. The point is, technically those are idols. So are idols okay? I suppose it depends on subjectivity, whether or not it's taking away from your faith in your religion. But with progressivism, I would say that they actually kind of encourage idolatry because they want you to have idols of them. To the point where they have saints, as I mentioned, people like George Floyd, and they have candles or murals or shrines that tie back to him. There is also things like the pride flag or any pride-themed anything. The pink hats that feminists wear. You could call this religious garb, you could call it idolatry. Either way, I would say it's encouraged. So they promote it and people do it. So it's definitely part of it. Of course, if you're going to have idolatry, then there's the idea of sacrilege. A violation or desecration of something that is considered sacred or holy in a particular religion. And we've got that. Oh boy, do we got that. Actually, Let me pull up an article here. Because boy, howdy do we have that. Let's see. Truck and... here we go. So we talk about sacrilege and desecration. I want to bring up a news article here. This is from a while back. This is from only 2022. About a year ago, actually. Let me bring this down. So this came out last year. Man who vandalized a South Florida gay pride crosswalk ordered to write a 25-page essay on the Pulse massacre. In terms of punishments, he got off pretty easy. And my God, is there a picture that more says Florida than that? Anyway, though, when he crossed a crosswalk that had been painted in the Pride Rainbow, and not just the Pride Rainbow, if we look up here, this is a Pride Rainbow with the brown and black stripes, which means that this is the racial Pride Rainbow. He burned out and he left rubber on it. This was seen as a punishable offense, a hate crime offense, and he was punished accordingly. Why? Because, as I said, it is a religion. It has institutions and it has institutional power. And since it has institutional power, it has enshrined that sacrilege is against the law. Sacrilege against them, specifically. And so, because of his sacrilege, he has been punished. This is just one example of many that I could pull up, and I'm not going to pull them all up because we would be here for a very long time. The point is, though, they have it. The last one, of course, is then paganism. Now, this one I'm not sure if it belongs in here or not, but this refers to the worship of multiple gods or the worship of nature or natural forces, often in contrast to monotheistic religions like Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. And the reason why this is on here is because, well, I stated before that progressivism does not worship a god. It does, however, worship the state. And in particular, it worships the government so long as the left is in control of government because they only see the left-wing parts of the government as being legitimate. So, as long as there is a left-wing president, as long as there is a left-wing cabinet, a left-wing Congress, a left-wing court, they will follow it. But they believe that following anything else is basically the same as apostasy. Hence, they were all on board with the government under Obama when the left controlled everything. They had the presidency, they had the Congress, they had the Senate. And anything that those bodies did was good in their eyes, and anything that the conservatives did to stop them was considered heresy. It was considered apostasy. But what happened as soon as we had our elections and the Congress turned ever so slightly to the conservatives? Suddenly, the House of Representatives was bad. Why? Because now it wasn't their God anymore. And anybody who follows the House of Representatives now is basically an apostate from the left. So now that we have established that they are a religion, we can go through all of these and show that they share all the same limitations and all the same punishments that any other religion would. Let's see, and I'm falling behind on my chats here. Tuck says JK was real progressive there for a while. She didn't mind changing people into black, gay, whatever, right up until there was something that negatively affected women. Well, that kind of goes back up to what I was telling JP earlier. The earlier comment where JP said, how do we survive the future where we have all this instant gratification? I'll tell you the same thing that I say the same thing about J.K. Rowling that I told JP. Nobody seems to care until it comes to them. That's actually one of the reasons why I talked about things like politics in one of my previous ones, because it's not actually up here. But I said, the reason why politics and things like that are important is because I view politics as a wildfire. You can only ignore it for so long. Sooner or later, it's going to come for you. And if you don't prepare for it, you're not going to be ready for it. So yeah, she was very progressive, and then she's like, oh wait, no, they're coming for me now? That's not what I wanted. Oh, well then perhaps you should have thought about that before it got there. They didn't just come out of nowhere. They didn't just spring up out of the snow like the Huns in Mulan. Nope, she didn't pay attention, and this is what happened. And Big Bod said recently there was a boy who's under the board of his school because he says there's only 2 genders. There's actually been several things that happened. Another article that I have pulled up, because I wanted to get into some of the news of the week if we have time. But we've almost been at this for 2 hours now, so I don't know if we'll have it. But there was a university professor who is now under investigation and on leave. Because even though he is a gay man, he brought in chocolates. Specifically, he brought in chocolates from Jeremy's Chocolates, which is made by the Daily Wire, which is a religious conservative media company. The idea being, they made 2 bars of chocolate. One with nuts, one without nuts. And he named the candy bars his and hers. I'll leave it to you to figure out which one has which. Well, I get a drink because I am parched. So yeah, I mean, we see this all over the place. And of course, what happened? What happened there? Whether it's the boy who was in school or the professor who was in college, what did they say? They said there's only 2 genders. The professor just did it in a more subtle, snarky way. And of course, if you say that there's only 2 genders, what have you done? You have blasphemed. You have blasphemed against the progressive religion, and because the university is a religious institution, he has been removed from it, and he will be punished accordingly. So, I mean, there you go. Just further proof. So, that's really about all I have to say here. However, I did have this fun little thing that I wanted to kind of go through, and I thought that we would fill this in. What we have here, as I pointed out before, is we have the 5 pillars of Islam. We have the 10 commandments in Judaism, I think. Wait, we seem to be missing some here. Hold on, I can fix this. Some of my commandments had disappeared. Not entirely my fault, though. I mean, they are very kind of wordy. Judaism is apparently very verbose. Wait, no. That didn't change. Are they all here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, no, never mind. They are all there. I was wrong. Apparently I can't count. I'll add it to the list of things I can't do. So anyway, let's take a look at these. So the 5 pillars of Islam. There is Shahada, a declaration of faith, which states that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. the most fundamental pillar of Islam. Interestingly, if we go to Judaism, the first one says, I am Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And Christianity just says, you shall have no other gods besides me. Well, if we look at progressivism, do they have that? Kinda, yeah. They do. And if we're going to do that, we're just going to say that the state has supreme authority. All rights and privileges. Can I spell anything today? Apparently not. I still spelled that wrong. Are granted by the state. Okay. Can we get some word wrap in here? Button, 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 button. I have a button for this. Wait, is it over here? Format? No. View? No. Edit? I don't think so. Insert? No. Tools? No. Hold on. I can do it this way. Would you just close already? Stop it! Wait, hold on. I didn't want to do that. Undo that. Guess I can't undo that now. Okay, format cells, alignment. Here we go. Wrap text. There we go. Much better. And Tux just says, oh, that's A-N-Y-T-H-I-N-G. I don't like you sometimes. You go away. Alright. Next for Islam is Salah. This refers to ritual prayer that Muslims are required to perform 5 times a day facing towards Kaaba in Mecca. Okay. Nobody else has that. Like, as far as I know, literally no other religion in the world has that. So we're not going to include this one because progressivism doesn't actually do that. They do not require you to do these things multiple times a day. Or even once a day, for that matter. So what else do we got? Idols. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. This one just says, you shall not make for yourself an idol or worship any other gods. I would say that we need to do the opposite for the progressives. Because for the progressives, I would say it's actually kind of important for them. And I would say that you shall create idols for saints and how else do we want to phrase this? You shall create idols for saints and I want to say other significant people. Whether they be in government or anything like that. I mean, there's people who literally have candles still for Ruth Bader Ginsburg because they think that she was, you know, that important. Let's see. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Or this one, you shall not take the name of your Lord God in vain. They don't have anything, but... or like that. However, we can simply put on here, dissent will not be tolerated. There is no debate. Let's see, zakat. This is the obligation to give a portion of one's wealth to charity with the goal of helping those who are less fortunate. Actually, that's very important. Except they want to redistribute your wealth. This one just says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But on the seventh day is a Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. Man, I'm working 7 days a week these days. If I gotta join somebody, I'm joining the Jews. Christianity says keep the Sabbath day holy. Well, the progressives don't really have a holy day, but they do have this one. And so, the obligation to give a portion of one's wealth to charity? Well, instead, why don't we do this? Wealth should be redistributed. Can I spell? Redistributed. According to privilege and position. Because obviously if you are lower on the progressive stack, on the intersectional stack, then you should give more than those who are at the top of the progressive stack, and if you hold a higher position in the progressive stack, you are entitled to hold more than those who are on the bottom of it. Let's see, what else do we have? Under Islam. Psalm. This refers to the practice of fasting during the month of Ramadan. Well, the left doesn't fast anything. In fact, they believe that big is beautiful and that fat is healthy. So, yeah, that's obviously not going to happen. And Hajj. This is the pilgrimage to Mecca that every able-bodied Muslim is expected to make at least once in their lifetime. And Big Bud says, be careful. If you want to be Jay, you can be on the Biden cabinet. I doubt he has any there. I mean, you might be able to surprise me on this one because I haven't looked, but I highly doubt he has any there. Because any self-respecting Jay, they wouldn't want to be there. I mean, with everything the Biden administration's been doing, I don't want to be there. Alright, so anyway, let's go. Since we know these last two don't really apply, let's go back to these. Honor thy mother and father so that your days may be long in the land that your Lord, your God, is giving you. Or just honor thy father and mother. Okay, the left explicitly believes that you should not honor your mother and father. The reason being is that if your mother and father do not agree with you in terms of your sexuality, your racial status, your transgender status, or your gender expression, you are encouraged to turn them into the authorities, where the proper authorities can then come and take you out of the home to get you the treatment that you need. So there is no honor for your mother and father. There is no loyalty to your mother and father. So instead, we should say honor and loyalty to group over family or individual. So next we get into you shall not murder. Okay, well that one's off, because they absolutely believe in murder. And in fact, they have done it, and they have promoted it. As a matter of fact, after the Christian school shooting, there was supposed to be a, quote, trans day of rage, in which they were actually calling for people to get armed and to go after other places. That ended when the FBI started showing up at people's houses saying, you made a threat and you made it across state lines? Yeah, that's now the realm of the FBI. They quickly backed off from there, but it does show that they do believe in violence and murder. So, if we're going to do this, we can simply say there are no bad tactics, only bad targets, which is something that they have been noted as saying before. Next is thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, I mean, they obviously don't believe in commitment. They are the group that does not believe in any kind of fault divorce or any kind of, staying together at all. They don't believe in families or communities or anything else like that. They only believe that you belong as part of the faith until you're no longer faithful. So thou shalt not commit adultery? They don't care. So they're just going to say, free love in every sense of the word. Because they believe in free love between men and women, although it's kind of frowned upon, men and men, women and women, trans people of every single differentiation, and, as they're adding now, between people of any age. After all, it was the United Nations that just came out and said that they no longer cared about the age of consent in other countries around the world. So even age is no longer a barrier to the left. You shall not steal. This goes back to the idea of redistributing. So we can just say, let's see. Redistribution is a virtue. JP says, I believe in the Buffalo Wing Party. Now that's a party I can get behind. Let's see. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. That's the same in both of them. However, I believe this goes right back up to there are no bad tactics, only bad targets. So we can skip that one. And you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. And this one just says, you shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. However, the left is very covetous. If they see something, they want it. And so, when we look at this, we can simply say that it is your right to covet and to seek that which you wish to have. Because that is what they encourage people to do. If you see it, go for it. And if anybody tries to stand in your way, remove them. And so while I think we did manage to trim it down by one, we do still have a nice 9 commandments at least for our leftist progressives. And I think that if we look at these again and just kind of read them over, how many of these do you think that you have heard either from the mainstream media, from the independent media, from the government itself, or just from people that you have heard talking around you? How many of these things have you heard? Now, I am terminally online, okay? My entire life is online. I have heard all of them, which is how I knew to put them on here, of course, so that's obvious. But the real question is, how many of those have you heard before? And Tuxedo says, I think that needs to be tied into the real world, the Covet one. But does it, though? You have to remember, these people are not encouraging you. It is not encouraging you to necessarily seek things in the real world. After all, according to biology, you cannot go from being male to female or female to male. Just because you have a surgery that makes you one or the other, or makes you look like one or the other, does not change you at a genetic level. You are what you were born, you will always be. Furthermore, I am a furry. I have not hidden the fact that I am a furry. I am a very proud furry. But I have to explain that even among furries, there are different tiers. I am a furry. I enjoy anthropomorphic animals. I like animals that look like people. I like to watch them. I love Zootopia. I love Disney's Robin Hood, Once Upon a Time. I saw another one recently. I don't remember what it was. However, I also love the Fantastic Mr. Fox. If you've never seen the Fantastic Mr. Fox, your life is not complete. You have to go watch the Fantastic Mr. Fox. However, even among the furry community, you have others. So you have people who are what they call otherkin. Now, an otherkin believes that they were born in the wrong body. They think that they are an actual wolf. They're a wolf in brain, but their wolf brain was born into a human body. And yes, we all agree that these people are kind of nuts, but these are the people who like to go out and do things like howl at the moon. Or to go running through the woods in the middle of the night. And I mean, I don't really have a problem with that. If you want to go through and howl at the moon, as long as you're not keeping me up at night, go knock yourself out. If another wolf shows up, they will show you just what kind of wolf you are. Which is that you're not a wolf. There are others called, let's see, I think they're called Therians. And Therians, and yeah, you're all getting you're all getting an education into furries today. Therians believe that not only are they in the wrong body, but that they are not even a human. They believe that they are some kind of human or animal spirit inside of a human body. Not just a brain, but that they are an actual animal that has been reborn or reincarnated. And so you got that. Then there's another one, and I'm trying to remember what it is because it's been a long time since I had to go through this. The hell is it called? I don't remember it now. There's another one, though, that I don't remember the name of it. However, they basically believe that they are not an animal that has been born into a human body, but that they are some kind of mythical creature. We're talking dragons, griffins, hippogriffs, what else? Just any of these mythical creatures. Phoenixes. They believe they are an actual mythical being that has been sent down to Earth and like captured inside of a human body as some kind of punishment or reincarnation. And this is actually kind of really important because these people tend to do one of two things. Either they tend to go through extreme body modification, trying to make themselves more exemplify what they think they are inside. And I'm talking about like teeth sharpening, subdermal implants for things like horns or ridges. We're talking about feather implants. Or they just kill themselves. And they say, well, if I'm imprisoned in this body, then it's just time for me to be free of this body. And so they kill themselves so that they can be free of this body. They are the absolute most extreme faction of what will be considered the furry subculture, subcommunity. So these people have this, and they are absolutely encouraged by people in the progressives. And you know what? I think I remember the website that I forgot earlier. Tumblr. You remember Tumblr? I remember Tumblr. I wasn't on it. But given the people that I surround myself with, you could not go a day without hearing Tumblr mentioned in something. And so these people would go there and they would be encouraged in this. Now, it's not restricted to just, a website online. These people are in the real world, and they're trying to make these body modifications. I mean, you hear about people who are transgender or transsexual. We also hear about people who are transracial, who are getting things like tattooing or skin pigmenting to change their race. There was actually a case a while back where somebody went through and got a whole bunch of surgery to make themselves Korean. And I couldn't tell you who it was. I don't care who it was. But they went through all the facial reconstruction and everything to make themselves look Korean. And now we have people who are coming out, and I cannot emphasize how much this is not a joke. Okay? I am a furry. I have known about people like this, but we have always been on the outskirts. Like, even the internet hates furries. The internet is one of the most welcoming places in existence. And the internet hates furries. But now, there are people who are calling themselves trans species. And they are getting themselves balled up in the entire trans movement, because if you can be trans everything else, you can be trans species as well. Obviously, you can't. But they're in there now. And we're supposed to take all these people seriously. I mean, if that's the way this works, then, I guess sign me up. I've been a furry forever. I can totally do the whole trans species thing, I guess. But that means that when Tux, you're saying that we need to tie this down to the real world, they're not tied down to the real world. Which is why when I say it is your right to covet, that means that if you want to covet the bunny from Zootopia and you want to be like the bunny in Zootopia, then you have every right to do that, and we should help you to get all the body modification and everything to do that. JP says, I identify as a bomb. Stay away from me. I like that. You should get one of those big COVID rings that people were wearing, so you had to stay like 3 feet away. And just repaint it and call it your blast radius. Nobody's allowed to come inside of my blast radius. Big Bod says, a furry is not a trans species. No, it is not. And I will give you an education on this since you asked. The entire idea of being a furry, it is a subculture of people who have an appreciation for anthropomorphic art. That means animals that look like humans or people who have animal features. It's a sliding scale. But if you have a certain affinity for anything inside of that scale, you can go ahead and call yourself a furry if you want to. The idea is simply this. We like the combination of people and animals. This does not necessarily mean that you want to be one. But we have an appreciation for it. Now, full disclosure, if there was a magic ray that could turn me into my fursona, I would do it in a heartbeat. But that's just it. It's magic. It's not possible. And I would say 99% of all furries will recognize that, yeah, you can't do that. It's just fun. It's part of your identity, but it's not the entirety of your identity. So people that are furries are just aficionados of this kind of thing. Again, like I said, if you like the old Bugs Bunny cartoon, well, the old Looney Tunes cartoons with Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Pepe Le Pew, Foghorn Leghorn, all of those guys, you can call yourself furry if you want to. If you were really into Zootopia, or like I said, Fantastic Mr. Fox, or any of these movies, yeah, sure, you can call yourself among them, and you'll be in good company because we all like those things too. We like them to the point where we say, hey, if I was going to be a character, what kind of character would I be? And so we like to sit down and say, what would I be? What species would I identify as? What would my features and markings be? You know, what would I be like if I were that? And in general, it's just... it's fun. Now, of course, as Tux mentioned, there is a massive lewd community when it comes to furries. Furries are absolutely known for their lewd arts and such. But, I mean, you have the same thing for just about everything anyway. I dare you to say that the idea of lewd furries is any different than people that went to see the Fast and the Furious movies and didn't go there just to drool over what the hell's his name? Was it The Rock? Was he in those movies? Anyway, I do know that I've talked to several women who said that they love the Riddick trilogy. And I did finally get around to seeing Pitch Black soon, but they said they love the Chronicles of Riddick trilogy. They couldn't tell you what happened in them. However, they love the Riddick trilogy mostly for Riddick. Yeah, so you can't blame the whole lewd thing on just people being furries. People lewd everything. They've been doing it before the internet, and now the internet is here, so they're going to do it a lot more. Let's see. Big Bot says, but if you wanted to be your persona, you are by definition a trans species. No? I think you have to stretch the definition a little bit, but I suppose if you wanted to do that, yeah, you could call me that. But the thing is that I'm not going to go around identifying as that. Because I'm not. Whereas people who are trans actually go out and they identify as that. Here's the thing. The reason why the trans issue is such a big issue right now, and I want to go into the subject of trans people a little bit deeper, because some people, you know, your average person thinks that the whole gay and trans thing came out of nowhere. I mean, it really cropped up in the last couple of decades and it's become a big thing. Not true. Homosexuals and trans people have been around forever. The thing is, you generally didn't see them. Now, with homosexuals, you didn't see them for a very good reason. It wasn't tolerated. And so nobody would talk about it. If you were with somebody of your own sex, you kept that shit way on the down low. Nobody had to know. That's why it was always such a scandal when it happened. That's why you would hear stories of, you know, when you go back to like the early 1900s, in most Western countries where you would say, this person has been caught with their gay lover. It's like, what do you mean gay lover? They're married. It's like, okay, yeah, they're married. But they were having an affair with somebody of their own sex. It was scandalous, so you wouldn't want to hear about it. The same thing is true for trans people. Now, for trans people, it was a little bit different. If they were very either masculine or effeminate, what they would do is they would just try to live that way. So if they were especially effeminate, they would try to dress as a woman. They would try to train their voice to sound feminine. They would train their body to move feminine. They would act feminine. And once they had everything down, the idea was to go out into public and to be invisible. A trans person knew that they had made it if they could walk up to any random person on the street, say hello, and if they were a trans woman, if the other person was to say, hello, ma'am, they would know that they had done it. Because they were seen as what they wanted to be. So they just went out and they did it. And that's what it means to be trans, is to go out there and actually be the thing that you want to be. And that is the big distinction right now, and why so many actual trans people despise, they despise with a passion the modern trans movement, because it makes an absolute mockery of everything they have struggled to do, and it makes it harder for them to do what they want to do. An actual trans person will wake up in the morning, they will be whatever they want to be, they will present that way, they will do their best to pass that way, and if everything goes right, at the end of the day they'll go home, and nobody will know except for them. But what do you see from the modern trans movement? You see that they go out and they try to get as much attention as they possibly can. The perfect example that I've heard has been this Dylan Mulvaney guy. I'm sure you've heard of him. He's very tied to the whole Anheuser-Busch scandal right now. But he's a perfect example because he calls himself trans. He's gone through the surgery, he wears the makeup, he's done, I guess, a little bit of vocal practice and everything. But, very importantly, he calls attention to everything that makes him male, which is one of the reasons why I will call him a him. Because he'll do things like wear skimpy outfits that show off the fact that he is male. And I believe the one very prominent example is when he made a video saying that trans women have to normalize the bulge. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to explain it here. But if you do, and it doesn't really take that much imagination, you understand that a normal trans person would be absolutely horrified, suicidally inconsolable, if somebody was to catch them like that in public and point it out. Because trans is just the convenient modern term for gender dysphoria. Gender, of course, being gender, and dysphoria being an extreme sense of dislike, uncomfortability, even hostility towards a part of yourself. I mean, there is a reason why trans people have such a high degree of both suicide and self-mutilation. Somebody with genuine gender dysphoria is regarded as having a mental disorder because they are, by definition, a danger to themselves. And it needs treatment. But modern day trans people don't care about that. They go out there and they flaunt the fact that they're wearing makeup or women's clothes, but they're making no actual effort to integrate themselves as the thing they say they're trans to. Similarly, when it comes to furries, because I haven't forgotten, I am getting back to that. Would I not be a definition of trans species? The answer is no. The reason why, I'm not going out there to try and live myself as a cat person. As I said, if there was a magic beam that could just make me, there we go, I am my persona, I would say yes, sign me up, but then I would actually be the thing. And that would be great. But anything less than that would just be pretending, and I'm not pretending anything. The only argument that I could make for somebody who is actually trying to be trans species is if they were to, say, get themselves either a great degree of makeup or a fursuit, and then live in it. Now, there is actually a case of this. And ow, I hurt my hand. I am such a wimp. I hurt my hand snapping my fingers. Okay, let me pull this up. Let's see. Man. This dude. Okay, you want to talk about trans species? I got something for you here. This is not a dog. And if you were to just glance at this, take, one quick look at it, and then let your eyes just slide off of it, you would not be faulted for saying, hey, that's a dog, and then move on. The more you look at it, the more you realize that's not a dog. And the reason why is because, well, it's not a dog. I wonder if they've got his picture in here. They might not. They do not. Okay, but this guy in Japan, $16,000 for a life-size dog costume to fulfill his dream of transforming into an animal. You want to talk about somebody who is trans species? This guy is trans species. And I mean, sure, I guess we can do this. Let's turn the volume off on that. That guy is trans species. Your normal furry? And even so, this guy can live out his dream if he wants, okay? I'm not going to stop him. He can do this all he wants, but you and I both know, at the end of the day, he's still going to be a person. And so all of this is just for show. You can't actually be trans species. Big Boss says it's shockingly good if you don't look at it a long time. Yeah, I know. It's like, fursuits in general can be amazing, but this is on an entirely different level. This is incredible. And I mean, they just get better. Not to mention, it's fully functional. The mouth moves, he can fetch, he can do everything. It's a sight to behold. But again, he's not actually an animal, and he never will be. So that's where I think the big difference is. Furries in general are not trans species. They just like the thing they like. And I mean, I don't consider them... I don't consider them any different than any other subculture. JP says it's full anthro. No, it's not. Anthro is human. Anthropology is the study of humans. This is full feral. That's why when we look at furries, we say anthropomorphic. It's taking a wolf or a rabbit or a cat or something and turning the wolf or whatever into a person. They may still have tails, they may still have animal heads, but they walk on two legs, they have two arms, they can wear human clothes. They're anthropomorphic. But they're not fully anthro because they're not human. This, of course, is the exact opposite direction. This is fully feral. There are no human qualities to this at all, except for the person inside of it. But yeah, again, this is where the line is. Most furries are not going to be considered trans species, no. And even if we get into some of those others, like otherkin or things like that, I would even struggle to call them trans because they're not really trying to do it. But again, that guy. I mean, it's hard. It's hard because you don't want to go to people and tell them not to do what they want with their life in their free time. It's their life. It's their time. But at the same time, this person wants to be a dog. He covets being a dog. Are we sure this is really a good thing? For him, for people around him? Is this really something that's going to help him both progress in his life and continue his bloodline? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. When you look at all of these are about making sure that there is another generation to follow you. So, you shall have no other gods before me. That means that this list of commandments, these are your rules. Nothing else. This is heresy. This is what you do. You shall not make yourself into an idol or worship any other gods. I always thought that was kind of the weakest one. You shall not take the Lord name of your God in vain. Why is this important? The reason why this is important is because if you can disrespect the basis for your rules, then you can disrespect the rules too. And if the rules are not respected, then the rules will not be followed. It's that simple. Remember the Sabbath day? This is not actually that important. The only thing that this does is make sure that everyone stays on the same page. Everybody every week gets a reminder of what we do. Honor your father and mother? Well, if they're raising you right and they're doing right by you, yeah, you should honor your father and mother. And you should hope that you can be as good, if not better, than your father and mother. You shall not murder? Because if you shall not murder, and they shall not murder, you shall not be murdered. How about that? We just all agree we're not going to murder. You shall not commit adultery. Why? Because we all have our own partners. Stay away from other people's partners, okay? Because if you start sharing partners, or if you try to have an affair with somebody else's partner, you're going to introduce problems where there don't need to be problems. You shall not steal, obvious. If you don't steal, you won't be stolen from, hopefully. You shall not bear false witness, basically, don't lie. And you shall not covet. Leave your neighbor's stuff alone, okay? Just because you're not stealing it isn't enough. Don't spend all day thinking about it. Why? Because if you follow all of these, if you follow this entire list, what happens if you do that? You get your work done on time, you keep your house clean, you keep yourself fit, you raise a good family, and if everybody does this, you build a big community or a big city, and you all go on to have a better tomorrow than you did today. This is you helping yourself to help everybody else. This, on the other hand, over here, is all about you. It's all about you. Me. All the way down, except for you can have anything and everything you want so long as you belong to the state. And as long as you are loyal to the state, then as long as you're loyal to the state will give you everything you want. It's not loyalty for loyalty's sake, it's a quid pro quo. And Bad Bod says the cat persona in Japan is anthropomorphic, the dog is not. I didn't see that picture. If I must have missed it. Also, no Instagram for me. I'm not on Instagram. Actually, I have a Facebook profile, so I guess I'm kind of technically on Instagram because they own it. But I have never gone to Instagram, so I wouldn't even know what to do with it if I did go. But anyway, that's why we see these rules here. And that's why all of this is absolutely unsustainable. And it's one of the things that I hear talked about very often. I've talked about it with people around me. I've heard people like Tim Pool mention it. Tim Pool is actually a really weird case because he cannot make up his mind. On the one hand, he's of the opinion that everything is lost, that everything is going to fall apart. The war never happened. The revolution did. We've lost everything, and it's all over. The U.S. is done. On the other hand, he always talks about how, you know how the gay people aren't having kids, and how trans people are sterilizing their kids, and eventually there's not going to be any of them left. And it's like, can you not, like, rectify those two things inside your head? I think the beanie is cutting off circulation to his brain. That's just my opinion, though. At any rate, though, I do think he is kind of right, though. I do think that in the end, it's all going to fall apart, but I think it's going to fall apart because it's unsustainable. These people are winning. They have won, really. I mean, they have all the institutions. They have all the levers of power. All of them. They have the government, they have the media, they have the schools, they have the courts, they have everything. They won. Okay? And as much as that is a black pill, it's true. They did. They won. It's over. They won the revolution without having to fire a shot. Good job. The problem is, though, these are their rules. If it wasn't for the... Even if we took out the fact that he is right, they are sterilizing their own voter base. The fact is that those who are there, those who even could breed, these are their rules. They keep kicking out their own loyal people just because they disagree with them once or twice. They keep taking away from the people who actually make things, and eventually there's nobody left to make things. Or if they don't, if it's not people that make things, or just things like stores, they break into them, redistribute the wealth inside, or they just steal it all, and then burn it down. Because they have no actual family or community structure, they don't actually build anything. And the fact is that because there are no bad tactics, they don't really inspire a whole lot of loyalty in the first place. The only thing that's really keeping them together is fear. It starts with love. You should want to be a part of them because they love everybody. But then once you get in, you find out that no, actually everything is governed by fear. You came for the love. You stayed because if you don't love them, they're going to kill you. And it's unsustainable. It will eventually fall apart. And it'll fall apart because eventually they're going to run out of food. They're going to run out of electricity. They're going to run out of water. They're going to run out of all those creature comforts and everything that are being provided by a system that was built up over hundreds of years. And I'm not just talking about the US. I'm talking hundreds of years in the US, in Canada, in Britain, in Europe. They don't know how to take care of it. They don't care to learn. They don't care about the people who do take care of it, and in fact they think they're problematic. Sooner or later, it's all going to fall apart. And then, once it does, they're going to starve. Or they're going to freeze. They're going to all die out. And the only people that will be left will be the people who actually do know how to do things. And who are those people going to be? They're going to be the people who honored thy mother and father and learned from them. They're going to be peaceful people who don't want to murder. They're going to be people who don't want to steal or be stolen from. They're going to be people who don't lie, people that are honest, because those are the people who build things. So this is a religion. If you want to be honest, I would call it a religion of death. It's a suicide cult waiting to happen, but it's gone so far beyond a cult that now, when it does commit suicide, it's going to take the entire country with it. It may take the entire hemisphere with it. And then we'll have to start all over. But now that we've gone through that in excruciating detail, I think we're set to leave it there. I think we can call this good. I think we've established now that it is a religion. We are in a religious conflict. Because there's only one of two outcomes here. The two sides cannot tolerate each other. It's them versus literally everybody else. And we have somebody new, Viraj Patel. Hello, Viraj. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right. Sounds Indian. Is it Indian? I feel like it is. And Bad Bod says no. They will say the trans movement is bad and the trad family is normal and eventually restore the monarchy with the rich stays rich but with divine right. You might be right about that. I can't really speculate as to what it's going to look like in the future when it all happens. That's definitely an option. I mean, that could happen. It doesn't necessarily have to be with divine right, though. If it's resettled by people with very, very strict religious connotations, then that's definitely possible. But we have history. We've seen that we can have monarchs that are not necessarily divine. We can have presidents even, which are voted upon by the people. But I do think that we will eventually come back to this idea of traditionalism. Like I said, one of these is going to have to win out, and only one of them really has lasting power. Not to mention that as prominent and prevalent as the progressive religion is, they are outnumbered. They do make a lot of noise. They make an awful lot of noise. But you also have to remember that the progressive religion, it is only in Western civilization. US, Canada, Britain, Europe. You don't even really see it down in Mexico. It's not in South America. It's not in Africa. It's not in Asia. It is kind of in Australia, but Australia doesn't count for anything. Nobody cares about them. But I mean, it's absolutely not tolerated in Africa. It's not tolerated in Asia. In South America, they have other problems. They don't have time for this. So it's only this small group here. They are in a religious war with just everybody else, and they're going to lose because they have no way to keep it going. The only question they really have is how much damage can they do before they lose? And the unfortunate answer to that is they can do an awful lot of damage. They really can. And they will. I mean, if you want to think about what would happen to them if they had absolute unfettered power, when you talk about the way that they demand people be censored, when they demand that people be re-educated, you're talking about people who look at things like Stalinist Russia, well, I guess the Stalinist Soviet Union, as not a cautionary tale, but an instruction manual. It didn't end well for Stalin. It wouldn't end well for them either. But again, these are people that don't have critical thinking. They're not capable of thinking more than one step ahead at a time. And they'll end up in the same place, the same way. But Stalin took a lot of people with him before he went. So did Chairman Mao. So did Pol Pot. I mean, all these people thought that they were going to be creating their new utopian society with new principles, new values, new foundational rules. And it failed every time. The left will fail, too. The unfortunate thing is because they're not as extreme, it's just going to take them a lot longer to do so. And again, referencing what JP asked earlier, they're not going to face the consequences of what they're doing until those consequences actually catch up with them. And when they catch up with them, it's going to catch up with all of us. So be prepared is all I can say. That's all I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to prepare you. I want to help you think better. I want to help you prepare better. If you take anything away from this at all, if you've been enlightened by any of this, then great, I've done my job. If you haven't, then, well, thank you for staying anyway. This was an enormous waste of time for you, but you stayed anyway for me, and I feel better about that. But speaking of wasting time, we've been at this for almost 3 hours now. I've taken up enough of your time. I think we've covered all the topics that I wanted to cover, and I think we've beaten this to death now. This and a couple of other ancillary subjects. Yeah, JP says, I asked that 2.5 hours ago. Yeah, but you know what? That's the sign of a good question. If I can keep referencing back to it, it's a good question. Okay? Because every good question should have echoes. Every good talking point should have echoes. And if it keeps coming back to you, you know it's important. Because things that aren't important don't come back to you. And Tux says, people tolerate stupidity as something unintentional. We need to realize it's identical to negligence. You're partially right. You're not entirely right, but you're mostly there. The thing is, people tolerate stupidity because of Hamlin's razor. The idea that we should not ascribe to malice that which is explainable by incompetence. And I covered this a while back when I covered evil, good and evil. Because as I pointed out, evil is intention. If you do something harmful on accident, it's not evil. If you do something harmful intentionally, it is evil. The problem when you're talking about people that are stupid is that you have people that do stupid things all the time. I did something stupid this morning. I didn't have breakfast. I'm very hungry now. In terms of, how harmful is this? It's pretty banal. It's pretty low there on the totem pole. But I'm sure you did something stupid today. We all did something stupid today. People are stupid. We all do stupid things. Which is why we have Hamlin's razor. Because if we wanted to criminalize every dumb thing that somebody did, the entire population of Earth would be in prison, except for the people who lied, cheated, and stole to stay out of prison, and they would be in charge of us. We don't want that, obviously. So when you talk about it being identical to negligence, there's something very important, and I covered it in the good and evil discussion, and I'm going to repeat it here. There is a difference between ignorance and willful ignorance. You are ignorant. I am ignorant. We are all ignorant because none of us knows everything. I am ignorant about many things. I am ignorant on how to cook things. I'm ignorant on how to sew. I'm ignorant on how to fix a car. I'm ignorant of these things because I don't know how to do them. And I don't know how to do them, at least in some cases, just because I haven't had the opportunity or the chance to learn how. This is what we talk about when we talk about Hamlin's razor. Now, where does Hamlin's razor stop? It stops at willful ignorance. If you don't know how to cook, and somebody offers to teach you how to cook, and you say no, this is now willful ignorance. Okay? You are not just ignorant of what you did, you have outright refused to learn how. Now, in terms of doing this, like, say, you really need to learn how to cook for yourself. Otherwise, what are you going to do? You're going to live off of fast food your whole life? Well, I mean, that's fine. And you can deal with the problems of, you know, your bad diet yourself. However, there are people who would argue, if you don't learn how to cook, and you eat nothing but fast food your entire life, and you end up with diabetes, and you end up on some kind of public health care, now your willful ignorance to learn how to cook basic food, then that is now actually harming others. Would you call it evil? I don't know. However, what if somebody wanted you to cook chicken cordon bleu? Do you know what chicken cordon bleu is? I bet Big Bod knows. Especially since it came from France, but, I mean, that might be me assuming too much. But chicken cordon bleu is a particular dish that I've actually kind of always wanted to try my hand at. The problem is, with chicken cordon bleu, and let me make sure that I've got the right thing here. Let's see. Chicken cordon bleu. Yeah, I do believe that I have the right thing here. The thing about chicken cordon bleu is that it is done with raw chicken. Now, if it's been prepared properly, much like if you went to Japan and ordered fugu, if it's prepared properly, it's fine. No problem. However, chicken is a source of salmonella, and if it's not prepared properly, then you can actually give people food poisoning with salmonella. So to offer to cook chicken cordon bleu for somebody, knowing full well that you have no idea how to do it, well, we really can't call that just ignorance or negligence now, can we? You're actively doing something you don't know how to do, knowing full well that you could be hurting somebody in the process. And that's where we get into the big difference. Like, if you know how to cook, you try cooking for something and it comes out bad, accidents happen. But we're taking the accident part and we're taking it off the table. It's no longer an accident now. You knew within a reasonable amount of certainty that you were going to do something wrong here, and you did it anyway. And Big Bod says it's not hard, just difficult to do because it has many ingredients, but not that hard. Yeah, my problem here is the raw chicken part. I wouldn't even I wouldn't try it. I don't trust my own skills that much, and I'm not a bad cook. I'm actually a pretty good cook, but not good enough to really be adventurous like that. So, anyway, that's where we get into the difference between what we tolerate and what we need to realize. Because you are right when you said we need to realize that it is willful ignorance, or it is actual negligence, or it is actual intention behind these things. That's why you're seeing a big push, especially in the independent media and places like YouTube, where they're talking to people and they're saying, stop having discussions with people who are actively ignoring evidence. Like, if you have somebody who comes up to you and argues a talking point with you, and you say, okay, I hear what you have to say. However, I have these pieces of evidence that say you're wrong. If their response to you is simply, your evidence is garbage, you're arguing in bad faith, you're an evil person, and you should be punished for it. Well, this is projection because they're actually arguing in bad faith. And you're finding it more and more people that are starting to realize, as you're suggesting, you have to recognize that this is intentional. And stop doing it. So, I mean, there we go. I hope that answers your question. It didn't ramble on for too long. Let's see. Let's finish up a few of these chats before we get out of here, because I want to get out of here before 3 hours hits. If I can. Let's see. Bad Bod says, when is RimWorld? You want to be an Aes Sedai. RimWorld will be out on Monday. I'm actually going to record it either later today or tomorrow morning. So I will make sure that you get in there. I think you even left a comment on the last one. If you didn't, I'll just make a note of it now, so we can do that. JP says, hit the like button. I didn't even hit the like button. Okay, now I've hit the like button. Bad Bod says, I'm stupid but smart enough not to post on social media. JP says, many could learn from that wisdom. Yeah, a lot of people could learn from that wisdom. Most of them in some kind of office somewhere. Bad Bod says, it's not hard, just difficult to do because many ingredients, but not hard. I have like a minimum 5 in cooking because I can do it just fine. I assure you, it's easy to cook chicken. Start to cook a chicken fillet first. You get the hand. Okay, here's the thing. I can actually cook chicken just fine. I thought chicken cordon bleu, though, was raw. I thought it was served raw. Am I thinking something else? I might be thinking of something else, actually. But there's some dish that is served with raw chicken, and I know this because when I went to order it somewhere, and I don't even remember where it was a long time ago, there was a warning on the menu that warned, this has raw chicken. And I immediately just kind of went, ugh. Tuck says, pretty sure chicken cordon bleu is cooked. Sure, you start with raw chicken. I'm pretty sure you start with raw chicken no matter what you do. But I can cook chicken just fine. I can do a good job cooking chicken even. Nothing terribly special. It's not going to go into like a Michelin star restaurant, but I can cook chicken that is pretty good. Okay, so I guess no one else believes me that there's a raw chicken dish. Hold on a second. Chicken. Let's see. No, not you. Let's see. Bad Bard says, it's not chicken, it's a tartare. Maybe it is chicken tartare I'm thinking of. Chicken tartare, raw chicken is served on many menus, so they'd be hard-pressed to find it in any neighborhood establishment. It might be chicken tartare, actually. Okay, so I got it wrong. Again, I'm not a big cook, so I don't know all the dishes. Chicken tartare. Let me take a look at this. Let's see. Bad Bod says tartare is beef with egg on it, all raw. And so I guess chicken tartare would be the same with chicken instead of beef. Makes sense, at least. Let's see. Chicken, butter, parsley, scallions, salt, pepper, breadcrumbs, shallots, tarragon, chervil, mustard, vinegar, olive oil. Yeah, that actually sounds better. Okay, so I got my dishes mixed up. My bad. I'm only perfect. I'm not right all the time. Okay, so yeah. Something like that then, okay? I would not do chicken tartare. Let me correct my statement from earlier. I would never do that. because I would be terrified of the food poisoning I would give myself or somebody else. And if I was to offer it to somebody else and somebody else got sick because of it, yeah, I would say that, yeah, that's my fault and I'm responsible for it. But for someone to know that they could not do that properly and then try it anyway, yeah, then we're getting into the realm of willful ignorance or intentional negligence. All right. So anyway, now that we've got that that culinary conundrum straightened out, I think it's time to get out of here. So we did a good job. We covered a lot of information here. I hope you took something away from it, whether it was about my now almost empirical assertion that it is a religion that we're up against, not just some kind of weird cult across the country, or if you learned something more about furries or about cooking. It's a weird live stream. We did religion, furries, and cooking. You could not put those three things together if I paid you to. So if you took something away from that, at least do me the favor of subscribing, hitting the bell icon so you hear for every video when they come out. If you haven't already done so, sure, or if you come across somebody else who also might enjoy this, or who could really use it, because ignoring the furries and the cooking, if you know somebody else who's into the whole culture war thing, but they still keep calling it a cult, either share the video with them or at least share the points that you learned in this with them. I don't care if they come back and watch the video. I don't care if you come back and watch the video. But if you can take what you learned here and spread it to somebody else, then my job here is done. Okay? I did a good thing. Otherwise, at least leave a like on the video, leave a comment down below, especially if you've got any suggestions for future lectures, because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm kind of running out of topics. Doing this every week is a lot harder than it seems. I mean, I cannot imagine people who do this kind of thing on the daily. Like, wow, teachers do not get enough credit. I could not draw up a lesson plan every day and then go in and do that every day. It's just, I don't know how they do it. So yeah, leave any suggestions you've got for future lectures down in the comments below. And if you haven't joined the Discord already, do so, because I'll be heading over there. We have a good time over there. We keep attracting new people. We talk games, we talk tabletop, or we talk video games, tabletop games, lectures, things like that. It's fun. So come join us in the Discord. Otherwise, I will see you here tomorrow for the tabletop stream. We're going to be starting Final Fantasy. You asked for it, I'm giving it to you. We're going to start on Final Fantasy. And if you don't want to come for that, then I hope I at least see you next week for the next lecture. And until then, take care.